So the Zodiac Killer.
Well, California, where I'm from. Okay, so I
Yeah.
remember this period vividly. Okay, so by the way, the Tate LaBianca killings occurred on my birthday, the year I graduated from high school. So I remember this.
Happy birthday.
A term which has been used for that, there's a writer by the name of Todd Wood who's coined, I wish I'd come up with this, Killerfornia.
Hmm.
And which is just sort of a chronicle of the serial killers and disappearances in the late 60s and 70s. So you've got the Zodiac, you've got other ones. I mean, I hate to say it, I'm not trying to be flippant about it, but I mean, young female hitchhikers were disappearing at an alarming rate in Northern California. There are bodies that have never been attributed. Some think that they're the Zodiac's victims, but it was a dangerous time. Edmund Kemper, the CoEd Killer was another one. There were a lot of creepy psychopaths running around. I don't know whether it was something in the water or what was going on, but it was a menacing in some cases. Hitchhiking, especially if you were alone and female, was not something you wanted to do in much of the Golden State, certainly not up around the Bay Area. So a lot of these strange sort of killings that were going on. The Zodiac it's one of those things where you have these people who have theories about it. And if you don't share their theory, then, you're part of the problem in some form or another. So I'm not sure, for instance, that the Zodiac killings were all committed by the same person. I think there might have been multiple people involved. And, the first killings are all of couples. It's very sort of clear that I remember in my examination of it, one of the things I was looking at specific, what else is there to say about the Zodiac killing? So what I was going to look at is that there are all of these accusations that there was an occult aspect to it, that there was some sort of ritualistic aspect. So I looked at different things, locations, victims, phases of the moon. That's always worth looking at. I didn't find much correspondence in any of those. In one of the killings, I think the one in Lake Berryessa, he does appear in this kind of weird hooded costume. He's got his symbol, the sort of compass or aiming reticle, circle with a cross through it that can mean a variety of things. He used guns and he used knives, but he certainly had a thing for couples, except in the last of the killings, which is of a cab driver in downtown San Francisco, who he shoots in full view of witnesses, which is completely atypical.
And also when he was stabbing the victims, it doesn't seem like he was very good at it. Or if the goal was to kill them, he wasn't very good at it because some of them survived.
Yeah, he's not particularly thorough about it. He seems to have had much more of the violence seems to be directed at the females than the males.
So, I mean, there's a couple questions to ask here. First of all, did people see his face?
There's a composite drawing of his face, which I think is based upon the Stein killing, the cab driver killing, where there were people who saw him or who claimed that they saw him. The other ones were all when it was fairly dark.
Right.
I'm not sure that anyone else got a look at his face. The one that occurred in the daylight at Berryessa, he was wearing a mask. So there's something in common initially in the targeting of victims, which doesn't in the last case. Then after that, there's just these different cases of where there's a pretty good case to be made of a woman who claims, I think she and a small child were picked up. Her car broke down. She got a flat tire and she was picked up by this guy who she got a very sort of strange vibe from, who eventually just let her go. Well, that might have been the Zodiac. It might not have been.
You do this kind of rigorous look saying like, okay, what is the actual facts that we know? Like reduce it to the thing that we know for sure. And in speaking about his motivation, he said that he was collecting souls
For the afterlife. That's kind of occulty.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I believe. Is it the Vikings or the Romans? They believed this in battle.
You're essentially making sacrificial victims and they will be your ghostly servants in the afterlife.
Do you think he actually believed that?
Who knows? I mean, here's the question. Was he making that up just to be scary? Or is that what his actual... That's what he's saying his motivation is. So let's take him at face value. Rather than trying to wish that into the cornfield, that is to get rid of it, let's just take it to face. So he's claiming that he's killing these people in order to acquire slave servants in the afterlife. He will subsequently go on to claim many more victims. I'm not sure, 44 eventually he will have, before he just kind of vanishes. One of the really interesting clues to me when I was looking at that case, which I didn't find anybody else that tended to make much of it of, is that it all has to do with this kind of Halloween card that he sends to the press in San Francisco. And it's talking about sort of rope by gun, by fire, and there's this whole sort of wheel, it's like the Zodiacs. But what was this drawn from? Where he got this from is from a Tim Holt Western comic book published in 1951. And you see the same thing on the cover. It's Wheel of Fortune, but with different forms of grisly death on it. And all of the things that he mentioned are shown on the cover of this. So whoever put together that card saw that comic book. Well, that's kind of an interesting clue. So does that mean he's a comic book collector? When would he have... I mean, that is one... And also, but where he got the idea from. So he's incorporating these things from the... Then there are, of course, his codes, which people have, which aren't all that difficult to decipher, probably because they weren't meant to be. The other thing that you find often with serial or psychopathic killers is they're toying with the press. I mean, this goes all the way back to Jack the Ripper. They get attention. And then he just disappears.
Why do you think he was never caught?
I think they knew who to look for. There's nothing much to go on. I mean, there was a guy who was long a suspect, and then eventually they tested his DNA and find that it didn't match any of the things that they'd found. Again, it goes back to, I'm not even sure that it's one person who's responsible for all of them.